Hi, welcome to the next edition of the H-Frame podcast. My very special guest today is my old basketball coach and great influence on me over the years, Coach Tom Bonfiglio. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing well here. It's a little rainy. It's first rain we've had this year
Yeah,
after 4 consecutive seasons of very, very intense wildfires. By the
yeah,
way, I was also evacuated this year. I now
yeah.
live in Oakmont from my home in Santa Rosa. Yeah, it's been pretty tough with not a lot of rain and a lot of fire.
Okay, we got an international audience in a way. So where is Santa Rosa? That's in Northern California, and
Santa Rosa is located 50 miles north of San Francisco in one of the most beautiful areas in the world we commonly call wine country,
yeah.
Napa and Sonoma County in that area. Beautiful moderate climate, rolling hills, microclimates, great wine, and really good people.
Okay. Now, before we get to your personal story, maybe, I think it's safe to say that you're a unique sort of basketball coach. You were my basketball coach, and you're a very unique educator. I think that's an understatement. What's your sort of personal philosophy in coaching, and why do you think sports is so important? You've been coaching now for many years. You're the all-time in the top 10 all-time in wins in California. What's your personal philosophy in coaching sports, and whether it's track, football, basketball, and do you have one? Yeah.
I would say this, okay? Any sport that you're coaching, you're really teaching. The venue is a little different. I've coached football. I've been a head coach in football, head coach in track, head coach in basketball. The venue is different, but you're teaching when you're coaching. And I don't mean that you're just teaching a game. You're teaching life and you're teaching lessons to the young men and the young women that you teach and coach. I think the mistake a lot of teachers and a lot of coaches make, they don't realize the amount of power they have. And I
Hmm.
don't mean that power in a Machiavellian sense.
Hmm.
I mean power in a sense of influence. Um, you have parents that are the primary educators of their children. After that, unquestionably, it's teachers. And I think sometimes more so even coaches, because you're teaching them all sorts of important values like discipline, hard work, teamwork. And I think what's really, really important is you're teaching them something they really like, that they enjoy. If you talk to an athlete, that's his favorite subject in most cases.
Hmm.
Okay. So they're very receptive to what you're teaching them. The other thing I think, a really important thing when you're teaching your coach, it's important what you say, but it's more important what you model.
Hmm.
Your actions are the ultimate teacher. I know I had the really, really remarkable good fortune to play for two tremendous coaches and be taught by tremendous individuals at St. Rose as a young man, and at Cardinal Newman High School, and then at Santa Clara University by the Jesuits.
Hmm.
And that model of how you live your life and how you teach and how you walk your talk, that
Hmm.
is really essential. And I still tell my players a simple thing, we are going to win our share of games, we'll lose some, but people are not going to outwork us.
Hmm.
And yeah.
Well, I played for you as a young man, and I can certainly attest to all of that. I think your practices, I made a short Facebook post this week to kind of preview this podcast, but I remember your practices were probably the most mentally and physically difficult things I've ever done to this day in my life. But I always got something out of them. I always learned something, and I always learned what I could do where I thought I couldn't do it. And I think a lot of your former players feel that way. What do you remember those days?
Career, I was very young. I was a head coach at 27 years old. When you're young,
Yeah,
you have a tremendous amount of energy. And I think you focus a lot more on winning and a lot more on results and numbers when you
yeah,
first start coaching, because
yeah,
you're trying to prove that you're a good coach. Okay.
yeah,
I always had visions of being a great coach anyway. I was highly motivated.
yeah.
But I think one of the main things to me, practice is where you win or lose games.
Hmm.
And and Coach Fitzgerald, when I played, was extremely demanding. Not a word was said. When the whistle blew and you crossed the lines, it was all work. You spoke when you were spoken to.
Hmm.
Okay. You respected your teammates, but when you crossed the lines, you had red and you had gold, and everything was competitive. Everything was about perfection, something you don't achieve, but the closer you get to it, the better you become, and the more efficient you are as a person and an athlete. So to me, practice was always a tremendous challenge. And I always thought, and my players always have told me, the game was a much quote less demanding situation.
The games were easy compared to your practices. The games were a breather. We weren't even tired because we had been through 5 days of practice, and they were so difficult, but they were mentally challenging. I think all the players out there listening to this always remember: cut off the lead, don't pass off the dribble, ball you man, get in the lane. That's how you play defense, and we never lose that. Whenever I watch a basketball game, to this day, I remember all of those rules you taught us, and that was really how you play the game, I think.
Well, when I first began coaching and teaching, the framework basically is this: you have to have a philosophy. Philosophy means that you come up with a plan. One thing I learned early on, the great Bo Schembechler, the coach of Michigan, failure to prepare is preparation to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I've always really believed that as a teacher and as a coach. And I think I've always been a really effective in practice in preparing my game plan because I put a lot of time. I was meticulous about that. And the game is fundamentals. And, life is fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to be a successful student or a successful person in life, it's about hard work. It's about preparation. It's about planning. It's about working through challenges difficultly and keeping that focus. Okay. And that's practice. What is a study habit? It's practicing the correct things when you're reading and writing. You're grammatical. You were an outstanding writer. And, you could get out of the box, you could create, but at the same time, you had that real good framework of writing. And that's very, very consistent with my students and my players. I want them to get out of the box. I want them to be creative, but I want them to always have, a base of success they can draw back on.
I want to just talk one more thing about your practices before I get to your personal story, because it's really interesting to me to hear that, because as a young man, I wasn't aware of all this stuff. I was 17 years old, and it's you have a narrow point of view of the world. But do you remember the first thing that you did to us? We had to do a wall sit, a wall squat, and we'd start with 5 minutes, and every Monday you'd knock it up to 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and then we had to make a 1-on-1 free throw. You would pick somebody and you would say, you've got to make a 1-on-1 because that pressure is more than it would be in the game. Do you remember those? Those were really difficult. But yeah.
Pat, by the way, we still do that drill. We call that drill? We call it meltdown.
Meltdown.
We still have that. I got my whole team in the wall, sitting in good eagles, back straight, back of the head touch the wall, hands straight up, hands got to be thumbs in, arms got to be above the ears.
Believe me, right? I remember. Yeah, I remember.
The feet had to be 6 to 8 inches away from the wall. You had to be in right angles. And we would run and everybody said, I'd pick a shooter. You had to make the 1-on-1, right? If you didn't make the 1-on-1, you're up, you run again, back in the wall, pick another shooter.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember praying that you would pull somebody off the wall that would make 2 free throws, because that was really tough. That was like, it's an isometric exercise. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the listeners, it's where you sit in a kind of a 90-degree squat against the wall, but you're supporting yourself with your quads essentially, right? And you have to have your arms up, and really difficult.
It's thighs and quads. It's what we call a core. It's a core fundamental. And in basketball, it's a core. It's all about your core. It's about your abs. It's about your thighs and your glutes. And it's a great thing. That's why my teams have always been great defensive teams. We can get down in that position, stay in it, and get our head in the ball, and we can make people go where we want them to go.
And I can also say this, and before we move on, if you don't play defense in your system, you don't play. And I remember that. And that's something that we had to learn, how to play defense the right way. And you had a certain philosophy. And I think very few coaches do have a philosophy on defense. It's kind of, try to stop the other guy, but you really had a systemic philosophy about how to play defense, and I think that was really important.
It's more refined now, Pat, than it's ever been.
Uh-huh.
We play free jump switches. We play a lot of varieties of man, same
Yeah.
basic principles we teach. And a really important thing that I say is if you can't guard, you can't play. And I
Yeah.
also say if you can't pass the ball past the man guarding you, you can't play.
Pass past the man. I remember that drill. So
I,
that's that.
and I still do it.
It worked, and it was a difficult, those practices, everything we did had a reason. We would move from 10 minutes to one thing, 10 minutes to the other thing, 10 minutes to the other thing. And I'll get to Jerry and Steve Azevedo later, but why don't we switch gears a little bit and get to your personal story? Tell us about your parents and how you ended up in Santa Rosa. There are lots of Italians in Santa Rosa. How did that
Okay.
happen?
Okay, well, my family moved to Santa Rosa in 1870, long time ago.
Mhm.
Came through Ellis Island. My original great grandparents were Battalias.
Mhm.
Eventually, my great grandmother married a Bonfili.
Uh-huh.
My grandmother married a Bonfili. They originally ended up in Eureka, and they came back in those days. You had a train. The
Mhm.
train ran from Eureka to Stockton, and they stopped in Santa Rosa overnight. And eventually, my family settled in Santa Rosa. They had a kind of a bed and breakfast, if you be at that time.
Uh-huh.
It was that way for about 15 years. And then eventually in 1890, they opened an actual restaurant called the Bon Gusto, which in Italian terminology, that means good fare or good food.
Mhm.
Bon Gusto Hotel. And then during the Second World War, it eventually might be changed to my grandmother's name, which was Lena's Restaurant.
Mhm.
So with my family for over 100 years. Italians came to this area because Sonoma County is very, very similar to where they grew up in the province of Tuscany, which is a wine growing province, rolling
Mhm.
hills.
Mhm.
My family originally from Mesa Carrera, but that's why Northern California attracted a large number of Italians during that second wave of immigration here, and there's
Mhm.
still a lot of a real large portion of Italians in Sonoma County, Marin County, and this whole area in San Francisco. Just I think because of that, and I'll remember it's also close to the water too.
Yeah.
We're only about 40 minutes from Bodega Bay, which is the ocean. So
And off the air, you were telling me some stories. I knew that Peggy Sue Got Married was filmed there, the Nicolas Cage, Kathleen Turner film. But you told me something I didn't know, that Alfred Hitchcock used to hang out at your restaurant. And is
yeah,
that true?
yeah, Peggy Sue Got Married was filmed in actually right. We had a bad fire at the restaurant back in the late 80s.
Hmm.
But it was the film before then when really our restaurant was very, very Art Deco,
Hmm.
mud kind of, I'd say looking more like 20s and 30s inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
People love that rustic kind of look,
Hmm.
and very, very popular. But Francis Ford Coppola, when he shot Peggy Sue Got Married, actually, it begins in the actually what is now the girls' gym in Santa Rosa High School.
Hmm.
Almost the entire movie is shot in Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
Some of it is in Petaluma, a little bit of it's in Petaluma.
Hmm.
And eventually, of course, Nicolas Cage and Kathleen Turner were there. Came down to restaurant for 5 days at Lena's. They shot in our restaurant. They shot that famous scene where Nicolas Cage with the African American group on her bandstand singing.
Hmm.
And of course, when she comes down with her new boyfriend in a motorcycle, sit in the booth in the bar side there. They
Hmm.
actually mentioned Lena's in the script, I think 4 or 5 times.
Hmm.
We got paid a king's ransom for that, by the way.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was a very popular movie, really a good movie. And Alfred Hitchcock earlier, uh, he filmed a number of movies he loves Santa Rosa and Sonoma County.
Hmm.
The Birds probably his most famous. He shot that in 61, 62. And he used to bring after hours, he would bring his whole group over to Lena's, and my father would cook for him in our banquet room. So
Yeah.
he was a regular there, as were, we had a number of movie stars that would come to our restaurant. Betty Davis, some of those famous old, Henry Morgan was a regular. So was Fred McMurray, because they had big ranches and spreads up by what is now Dry Creek in Hillsburg.
Uh-huh.
So they would come in to the restaurant all the time. They had their favorite booth. They would sit on the dining room side. And we always went to great lengths to make sure they had their privacy. But
Uh-huh.
I can remember that as a young kid. And yeah, we had our share of movie. Joan Crawford one night I remember was in. We had our share of movie stars. It was kind of the place to go north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And sometimes, entertainers want their privacy, get
Yeah.
away from the big city. Santa Rosa was a really nice place to go to do that.
Yeah, and it was before the urban sprawl, so that was probably the first big thing after the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Santa Rosa.
Yeah, if you look at it this way, when my father grew up, my father, by the way, was one of the best guards in basketball. He graduated in 1939 from Santa Rosa High School.
Uh-huh.
Had scholarship to Santa Clara, a number of other schools, and had to give it up because my grandmother got diabetes.
Uh-huh.
But in any event, that there's no question that Santa Rosa became a very, very tiny town and became a very big one. When he went to school here, it was a town of 1,200.
Mm-hmm.
When I graduated from high school, it was a town of 25,000. Now it's 175,000.
Yeah.
And Santa Rosa is one of the biggest 100 cities in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting bigger all the time. Size wise, it's very large. I think California were like the 61st largest city. So it's become a big city.
Let's get back to that, because I don't want to lose my train of thought there. That the Cardinal Newman, the high school, was developed in kind of probably rural land in 1964. You were one of the first classes coming out of there. Do you remember what it was like in the early days of Cardinal Newman? Yeah.
I saw the first shovel of dirt turned.
Yeah.
Before they built Cardinal Newman. It was they started building Cardinal Newman actually in they broke ground in 63. School opened in 64. I was in the 4th graduating class in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
My brother Jerry was in the 2nd graduating class in 69. My cousin Randy, my first cousin, you may remember Randy, he was in the 1st graduating class in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Newman just recently celebrated his 50th anniversary.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, and I remember those years real well. In my first class, I graduated a class of 40 boys. It was a single gender school. It was all boys.
Uh-huh.
Of course, you had Ursuline up the hill, and Ursuline unfortunately closed in 2010. It was 130 years old.
Uh-huh.
But Cardinal Newman, that tradition, the Precious Blood Brothers actually were the order that opened the school.
Uh-huh.
And the bishop was Bishop Maher, that actually bought the land to build the school. That was all there was there, was that land. That was really a rural area. And it's still pretty agricultural in that part of Santa Rosa.
What I never asked you about it. I guess I never thought about it, but that was the crazy psychedelic 60s. What was it like going to high school and into college in those crazy years? Could you tell us, just us young people who don't remember?
I grew up, pal, look at it this way. I was 14 during the Summer of Love.
Yeah.
So I remember how crazy all that was. I wasn't part of the counterculture.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody was experimenting with all sorts of different things that make people look all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
And San Francisco was really the epicenter of that.
Yeah.
And eventually it matriculated to Los Angeles. But in my late teenage years, I saw Jim Morrison actually came to the Doors actually came to Santa Rosa. I was about 4 feet from Jim Morrison. He threw a cup of water in the audience on me and the girl I was actually trying to get close to at that time. But that was before the Doors cut Light My Fire into Green Album, which became a monster album. They became a tremendous group. I saw Janis Joplin a number of times live. She was tremendous. Had an opportunity to see some of those really eclectic, unbelievable stars. Back in those days, you go to Golden Gate Park, people played for free.
Yeah.
For free. They're out there just playing to play, Big Brother and the Holding Company, some of those I remember those great groups, Quicksilver Messenger Service. You had to be from that time. But
Yeah.
that was a great time to grow up. There was a lot of social change, obviously. I remember watching Dr. Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech, watching it live in black and white. Of course, we didn't have color yet.
Yeah.
Most TVs didn't have color yet. I remember the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I'll never forget that, November 22nd, 1963. I remember where I was at, the St. Rose in the corner cyclone fence getting ready to play kickball. I was the next guy up. I mean, you remember those particular things, just like I remember the wall coming down between East and West Berlin.
Yeah.
I remember all of those events pretty crystal clear.
And
a lot of
I never knew you were a Doors fan or a Janis Joplin. That we didn't think about that when we were in your practices, and but that's interesting to know. So yeah,
I love rock and roll, Patrick. Rock and roll is one of my favorite things. Yeah.
What do you remember about the Jim Morrison concert? And besides getting water thrown on you, it's tough competition.
You know what I remember about the concert? It was at the Santa Rosa Veterans Memorial Building. You didn't sit down.
Yeah.
Everybody came in and there were no chairs or anything.
Yeah.
You just came in, general admission. It was $3.50 to get in, $3.50.
Yeah.
And you just sat down, kind of double up, grab your knees like you would in a basketball camp. And they performed, and they started with the first song, A Break On Through. And they pretty much played almost that entire Green album. And I'm sitting there going, God, these guys are amazing. I've never heard of these guys. And then about 2 months later, Light My Fire, hits the
AM radio or FM radio.
Yeah, I mean, the thing exploded. That album went platinum, I don't know how many times. It's one of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time. And of course, my brother Jerry just recently, 2 years ago, they were in Europe and he was in Paris. He went to Jim Morrison's to the Tomb in Paris.
Yeah.
And I've never been to the Tomb. I've been to Paris, but Jerry went to the Tomb, and he's a huge Doors fan. Yeah.
Well, I never knew that either. You learn something every day, even after all these years. I'm happy to hear it. So maybe we'll cut to your sports career. You played for Ed Lloyd as the legendary football coach. And how do you remember your football career? You were a quarterback, right? Yeah.
I wasn't a very big kid. I came into high school. I was about 5'3", I think about 125 pounds.
Yeah.
Didn't play football, played basketball, and we had an undefeated freshman team my freshman year. We were 16-0. We were really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I played JV basketball. We only lost 3 games. Then I moved up to varsity basketball, played for Coach Fitzgerald as a junior. In the meantime, Coach Lloyd was my JV basketball coach.
Mm-hmm.
And we went 18-3. We were really good, outstanding team. And Coach Lloyd, my brother Jerry was the varsity quarterback, came up to me and said, I want you to be the quarterback next year, which was shocking to me because I'd never thrown a football like you said. You never threw in, neither did I. So he told me what he wanted me to do. And then I started working really hard all summer. And I became the varsity quarterback. And, I never lost a high school football game. We didn't have state playoffs. We were undefeated my junior year, undefeated my senior year. In fact, only had 2 close games in that run.
Mm-hmm.
And we were ranked number 1 in the state in our class division both years. They didn't have state playoffs. Basketball as a point guard, I still hold the oldest record at Cardinal Newman High School, the assist record.
Uh-huh.
Averaged 7.3 assists my junior year. And my turnover assist ratio was about 8 to less than 1. And we won the section by 21 points when I was a junior. We lost in the sectional final when I was a senior, but I had a great career there. Fitzgerald and Lloyd were remarkable coaches and remarkable human beings. I still talk to Coach Lloyd frequently. He's down now. He's retired, lives in Modesto. He still comes up once in a while. Yeah, pretty amazing. He won 217 games in his coaching career, averaged almost over 10 wins a season. I think he quit too early.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Coach Fitzgerald was a great coach. He won.
That's your basketball coach. Yeah.
290 wins, Coach Fitzgerald, in his 15 years which was a lot. Remember, you didn't have state playoffs, and so you played fewer games. But
Hmm.
yeah, he was 290 and 111 was his career record, Coach Fitzgerald.
Well, why don't we jump there, because we can get to your coaching career, because I remember my first year at Cardinal Newman was a sophomore. I didn't know one person in the whole school, but John Fitzgerald was my PE coach, and everybody told me that he was the legend, the legendary basketball coach at Cardinal Newman. But obviously he had some physical problems, and that was his last year, and you got his job, right? As a very young man. You were 27 when you got that job?
Yeah, the thing is, Coach Fitzgerald was the when the school opened, he was the athletic director, taught some gym classes. Okay, the gym today is named it's the John M. Fitzgerald Gym. It's
Hmm.
named after him,
Yeah.
and he's still legendary. And I've never coached a group of kids or coached a basketball camp where I didn't start by talking about him.
Hmm.
Usually that was my last soliloquy in all my camps, and I talk about him
Yeah.
because of the impact that he had on me. A tremendous devout Catholic, a man of principles, a man of character, a great teacher, very good friend of the great John Wooden. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't
John,
know that. Yeah.
John Wooden actually came up and spoke to me in my gym class, spoke to our gym classes.
Uh-huh.
And I a few times ate breakfast with Coach Fitzgerald and John Wooden and Coach Wooden down at Stanford at the Coach of the Year clinic when I first began my career. And they spoke to one another like you and I are speaking right now. Very good friends, very complimentary of each other, and definitely both men of faith in God and just tremendous role models, obviously.
Hmm.
But I was fortunate. I had great high school careers. That's where the tradition of Cardinal Newman was built. And I played for, and in my opinion, the greatest football and greatest basketball coach ever to coach around here.
And so John Fitzgerald, you're following a legend. It's like Gene Bartow following John Wooden, right? And you get that job. I remember I was just a kid. We were playing a summer league game. I think we were playing Cloverdale that game. And the next day we saw the newspaper. It was the headlines in the local paper that Coach Bonfili, age 27, gets the job at Cardinal Newman. Do you remember your feelings getting that job as a varsity coach? It's a big deal. People, if you don't listening, that's a very young age to be a varsity high school basketball coach in a pretty big sports program.
Well, the Cardinal Newman, even then, was a really celebrated sports program. It's kind of the diamond of this whole Rebel Empire area. It's the program, especially in football and basketball. And Coach Fitzgerald, remember, I was his JV coach. I actually started working at Cardinal Newman in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
So 80, 81, and the last team he coached, actually 79, 80, that last team was a very good team. And Coach Lloyd and some people came to me. Coach Fitzgerald had an illness. He had Alzheimer's,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't know it. He didn't know it. Okay, and the disease was really an unknown then.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember sitting in the office with him after they beat Casa Grande. I'll never forget this. He's in the main office on the phone talking to the paper. I'm in the other office. He stuck his head back into my side of the office, said, "Who do we just play?"
Really? Yeah, that must have been
Yeah.
sad. You know.
And he just, the memory started to go. He wouldn't remember people that he played or didn't play. Troy
Mm-hmm.
Blank has a pretty good story about that. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to take his team over during the year. I refused to do that. I would not do that.
Yeah.
So I helped him, and Jack Fitzgerald, his son, helped him. They ended up having a really fine season. And that was his last season. And then, yeah, I took the job over when you guys were my first team.
I was your.
Yeah.
I played for you 3 years, because I played for you 1 year JV, the sophomore year when you're 15, I guess, and then I played for you 2 years on varsity, and that was a pretty successful team we had. It was a kind of an interesting experiment that your first team, you had a bunch of young kids, and you had to kind of get us ready. And I remember not knowing if we could do it. And I still remember that you were a really good coach, and we really respected you. And we were afraid of you a little bit, but we did everything that we needed to do, and I think we did okay. We had our ups and downs, but yeah,
I
yeah,
think one thing you're bringing out there is a very important point. As a coach, I think you need to instill respect. There has to be a little bit of an edge of fear there. Okay. You don't want to motivate through fear. Okay. But
hmm,
on the other hand, things have not changed any, Pat. I'm 67 years old. When I
hmm,
walk in the gym and blow my whistle, everything stops.
hmm.
And I'll tell you what, it's not a lot different from those days when I coached you. You know, when there's a timeout, you sit on the bench, you listen,
Yeah,
and you do what you're told. And I'll tell you, that's got harder and harder over the years because there's a lot more resistance, not only in kids, but the parent thing is a lot more resistant
yeah,
to that real, that buy-in, that absolute loyalty and that commitment to execute what the coach wants you to do.
yeah, yeah.
But there is a little bit of fear in there. In other words, if you don't do what I want you to do the right way, there is a consequence.
I remember those. I remember those
Yeah,
consequences.
I think that's a valuable thing to learn. You know,
Yeah, we ran a lot, and but we were ready to play, and we were never not ready to play. I remember that. And you used to always tell us you never have an off game on defense. You can have an off night on shooting, but you'd never have an off night on defense. I remember that. You know.
amazing statistic. The year we beat Cloverdale in the Rose City tournament, 41-39, we shot 24% from the floor.
Yeah.
And we beat one of the best teams in not only California. Those guys went on and won 2 more state championships. Those guys were exceptional.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get back to that. Do you remember what it was like? I guess I was a junior, 16 years old. That was your first team. What do you remember about our team that we can maybe we'll go through a couple of the trials and tribulations that you might
This is
remember
what
from that team?
I had you guys as JVs, and we were very, very good JV team.
Yeah,
So I moved up with all you guys when you were juniors, and I thought we could be very good. By the way, you don't remember, but in the Press Democratic article, they picked us 5th
yeah, yeah,
because we didn't have a lot of people that were we didn't have a lot of people that were returning.
yeah, yeah.
We were picked 5th in a league, not supposed to be very good. In reality, we were real good.
Hmm.
And I think the goal in those years was to win 20 games. I think that's still a good, reasonable mark in a 26-game regular season. It's
Hmm.
the same now as it was then. In that first year, we were 19-7, and we got beat by Cost in a game we should have won in that first playoff game I coached. And then your senior year, we won 18.
Hmm.
So we won 37 those first 2 years. We didn't win a championship, which was a disappointment to me and to you guys.
Yeah,
But I thought we were a very, very good team. We had a lot of big wins.
yeah.
And when we played our best, we were as good as anybody in the area when we played our best.
And I guess one of your first, maybe your first month on the job, we won the city championship against, we beat Cloverdale. Tell us, why was Cloverdale so good? They had Craig McMillan, who Dick Vitale said was the Jerry West of California, right? The next Jerry West. And he was a McDonald's All-American, right? First team. Yeah.
Couple things about Craig. He's a
Yeah.
really successful JC coach now. They won a state championship 3 years ago here with
Yeah.
basically local players. And California has tremendous JC basketball. It's a huge state.
Yeah.
Craig in high school lost 3 high school games, and 2 of those were to Cardinal Newman, 2-year teams. They won back-to-back state championships the last 2 years, and he went to Arizona, started as a freshman, played 4 years with, of course, Tom Tolbert,
Mhm.
Steve Kerr, and we they every year, his Lute Olson, who was one of the greatest coaches in college basketball,
Mhm.
would come out and they'd go up and they'd have a big fishing trip up on the Eel River.
Uh-huh.
But Craig, people don't realize this. Craig was 6'7" and was a guard. He
Yeah.
could hand and shoot it, okay? Craig, but what people don't also understand, you realize he was 4th in the California State Track and Field Championships. He high jumped 6'11".
It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
He was an amazing athlete, and
Yeah.
one of the smartest players I've ever seen. Of course, his dad, John McMillan, was the head coach, one of the great coaches in the history of this area. Actually won 412 games in his coaching career.
Yeah.
So they were well coached, and he played with a couple guys. You know, Bergman went on and played at Arizona with him.
Yeah.
Played some football with him.
Yeah.
Craig Bergman, and he is still the athletic director down in the East Bay.
Yeah.
At Monte Vista. So, you know, he was great, but they had some other guys who were pretty good too.
They had a guy, Rich Rowland, who played for the Red Sox for, Major League Baseball. This team was from a small town. They were incredible. And you know what I remember about McMillan? He was such a good guy too, and also his dad. I really
Wonderful
remember.
human beings, and you know what they were? Humble.
Yeah.
Played the right way, gracious, and Richie Rolla was a great athlete too. You're right. He did play pro baseball and had quite a baseball career. But I mean, yeah, they had all three of those guys at one time. They were a handful. It was a good team.
And we beat them 2 times. They lost 3. What were they, 90-3 or something? And we beat them twice. And one of those, yeah.
That one game we beat them when you were a senior. That snapped a 47-game home winning streak.
Yeah.
And of course, after that one loss, they went 29-1 and won a state championship.
Yeah.
And, we beat them in double overtime. That was a memorable game. But we were down 9 at halftime, came back, made some amazing plays. You got the last rebound of that game. Yeah.
I remember that. Steve Dominichelli missed a 1-and-1, and I got it. And I had just come off a broken collarbone. I remember that. That was my first game back, I think, or one of them.
He was a former Newman guy that Cardinal. He played with you as a sophomore.
I remember him well. He used to tell me about the legend of Craig McMillan. He would talk about it when I was a sophomore. And but anyway, the funny story about that is Joe Turner, who we played with at University of Arizona, now works with my sister down in Bakersfield. And it's a funny combination because I talked to him after the game. I said, "Hey, do you know Craig McMillan?" And he took out his phone and he put out a big picture of a rainbow trout. And he said, "I just went fishing with Craig and Bergie up in Sonoma County." So it was a fun. Yeah. But that was probably your biggest win your first year. We beat Cloverdale, and then we beat Terra Linda in the Rose City Championship. What do you remember about that game? Those are just the few that I can remember.
I remember, of course, we went in the last shot. Sullivan hits it on a pick and roll.
Yeah.
We used to call red right to win the game 41-39 at the buzzer. They had won 80-40 over Rancho in the first round. So everybody says, "Man, Newman doesn't have a shot."
Yeah.
So we get to the finals. Terra Linda had an outstanding team, and their coach Phil Ching actually for years coached my freshman team at Cardinal Newman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Phil had a great player that went on and played college ball, about 6'4" kid, really good player, and they were very, very good. And I was worried about a letdown. I remember in the run through talking to you guys. We can't let down. The goals to win the tournament. The goal wasn't just to beat Cloverdale.
Yeah.
And we bumped it up, and we came out and played a tremendous game in the finals and actually beat them by 15.
Yeah.
And that team was second only to Drake in the Marin County League, and that team had a remarkable season. And we got the large bid instead of them because we beat them head to head.
Yeah. And that was a big game. I remember that. And any other memories about that team and generally your first team as a 27-year-old coach, and what was good about it, what was bad about it, hard about it?
Well, the other thing, I think you guys were my first team. And, we had some discipline problems at the end of that second year, right?
I remember those, yeah.
Brian and I have talked a few times about that. But you know what?
Yeah.
I think you get to back to this point about your principles.
Yeah.
And the thing about that, and I really believe this, that your first team, you taught me more than I taught you.
Really?
As a team.
Yeah.
Well, I learned a lot about coaching, about personalities, about winning and losing, about how to handle a team. And how to handle a team. We came back as seniors,
Mm-hmm.
We had everybody back. We had all these expectations. I learned a lot about handling a team better.
Mm-hmm.
when you have a lot of good players coming back. That's how I had took teams twice to the California State Championship, won 31, 32 games those 2 years. But I mean, I learned a lot from your team. And I
Well,
think
yeah,
if
yeah,
if your coach and teach your players teach you, you just
yeah.
have to pay attention.
Do you remember we were talking about it off the air before we were talking. I broke my collarbone. I got into a car accident with in a 65 Mustang. I guess we were lucky to be alive actually, but do you remember hearing about that?
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. And you know,
First,
the
it
girl
was yeah,
the girl that was a driver was pretty attractive. I remember hearing about that.
she
And I can
was. Yeah,
and
she
I can
was.
see where you make that mistake at your age, Patrick. And as
Well,
I tell kids now, Pat, I
yeah,
still tell my kids about that. I say, you
yeah,
know, after the game, you guys be real careful what cars you get into. And when you're
yeah,
going home from a party, what car you're in and who's driving,
yeah,
because it can be dangerous. I said, one of the great players I coached back in my early coaching career,
yeah.
I lost him on a car accident with, and I don't know all ins and outs of the driving, but it probably could have been a lot better.
Sorry about that, Coach. Yeah, I know. I was trying to be good, but you know, when you're 17, you know, those things happen. You know, but yeah, and I remember I broke my collarbone, and I remember they had to cut my jacket off, and we were lucky to be alive. That 65 Mustang is a strong car, but it was mangled, you know, and we were really lucky. We went off the cliff out there out by Mark West Springs Road, you know, and it was really
I
scary.
know exactly where the wreck was. Yeah, because
Yeah,
you know I'm real familiar with that area. You know, I heard about it before you came back to school. I knew you were injured. I was just glad you weren't seriously injured
yeah.
and that she was okay. And, you know, you recovered very well, actually, physically. I
I
know.
remember you gave me. We used to have sort of a kind of a quack kind of guy that you sent me to, and I still have it. My collarbone, I can still see it. You know, Dr. Sullivan, Tom Sullivan's dad, looked at it and he says, "Good Lord," you know, because my collarbone looked like a broomstick that had been literally broken in two. And I came back in 4 weeks because I wanted to get back for that Cloverdale game, and I remember that. And that was a strange year. And I
If I
remember.
didn't have you in that game, Pat, that we wouldn't have won it. I can tell you that. And
Well, I
that's all.
remember your support, Coach, and you knew that I probably made a mistake, and there was our football team had just beat Brad Muster in San Marin, and it was the same night, and it was the same night that Larry Holmes beat Randall Tex Cobb, and I remember we watched that, and the boxing match where Howard Cosell quit. I remember all of that night except what happened at the end. I don't remember much of that except the car going off the side of the road. Very
That's
scary.
that's called selective memory, Pat. It's okay.
That's right. But I drive a lot. It changed how I drive. I used to drive really fast, and I learned a lesson that night. But anyway, I still remember, Coach, I sat the bench for you my sophomore year, but I remember this, one of the most important memories I had. You called me out of class senior year, and you said that I made first team all Redwood Empire, and I could tell you were kind of proud of that, even if it was a week after that discipline problem that we had that you mentioned. And I respected that you did that. I remember that.
You know what? You were a great player. I'm always happy when my players are recognized. As I tell my players, any award an individual wins is a team award. It's a reflection of your team. And like John Wooden says, and I'm a huge Wooden fan, John Wooden fan. It takes 10 hands to make a basket.
That's right. But I remember this because the reason I bring that up is because in the summer, I played in that all-star game against the up north. We played against Del Norte County or what it.
Humboldt Del Norte All Stars. Yeah, I saw the game when you guys
Yeah,
played.
and I remember
Daddy
playing.
coached you, didn't he?
Mike Gaddy was the coach, and
Yeah.
Francie was the coach, and both of those
Yeah.
guys, you know, they would say I'm the only guy that knew how to play defense, and I said you wouldn't believe that if you talked to my coach. but
We had to get better in, didn't we?
yeah, you taught me how to play defense because I really didn't know how to do the footwork. I didn't know, most of defense is effort, but a lot of it is footwork and just
Technique.
yeah,
It's technique. And you know what? It is, but you can take a good athlete, make him a great defensive player in high school because they can move, and if they're smart, it's angles and it's fundamentals, and
Yeah.
that's what you became good at. Yeah.
And I remember our league was pretty tough. I was watching the 49ers play the Chicago Bears about 5 years after we graduated, and I looked on the television, and there was Brad Muster playing tight or playing running back for Mike Ditka's Chicago Bears, and James Thornton was playing tight end. And I said, those guys, those guys were hard to play. I always remember being sore after playing those two guys, and now I remember why. So
There were some great athletes coming out of our county
yeah,
in the 70s and the 80s, even the 60s. Of course, the great Mel Gray in the 60s that played for the St. Louis Cardinals,
yeah,
who were two-time All-American. He was a Santa Rosa kid. And of
yeah,
course, Jerry Robinson in the late 70s and
yeah,
John Wetland,
yeah,
MVP in the World Series in the 80s. I mean, in the early 90s.
yeah.
Yeah, there's been some great athletes for the size of the city this is.
We're going to lose a couple people on this podcast, but I remember some of those crazy characters that we had. Remember that guy that played for Mike Gaddy at Pioneer named Joe Barrett? He was kind of a interesting guy, but the guy could never miss. If they had the 3-point rule back then, the guy would have scored 50 a game. Do you remember that guy, Joe
Yeah,
Barrett?
you know what? Joe Barrett, remember it well. He averaged 32 points a game
Yeah,
without a 3-point shot, and he
yeah,
shot from about 30 feet. And I'll never forget this is a great Joe Barrett story.
yeah,
Okay. I'm watching him play Montgomery. I'm scouting him, right? I'm up
yeah.
in the stands and I'm behind the Pioneer bench. Okay. And the ball comes down and Barrett takes about a 35 footer. He's going out of bounds and drills it. Fadeaway drop shot, right?
Yeah.
He's running on the floor and Gaddy yells at him. Coach Gaddy yells at him, run the offense, Mike. And you know what he said?
No.
I am the offense. Right
Oh,
back to him, right down the floor. He said, I am the offense, and just kept running.
and he was true. That was right.
But that guy can shoot, I'll tell you that.
You
Yeah, I
know what?
remember.
You know what I remember between my sophomore and junior year, one of the reasons I improved a lot is I played with him down at the Santa Rosa Boys Club with a guy named Joe Hutt. You remember Joe Hutt was this guy that was an incredible player, and he got a tryout with the Warriors.
I know, you
Golden
know what?
State.
He played at Santa Rosa High School. He was a
Yeah,
really, really, really good player. Could
yeah,
shoot. He was a good player. I remember him. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And those guys were playing down there at the Santa Rosa Boys Club. Mark Flores, I remember, played down there, and it was this really great. Mike Gaddy's kid would play down there. Really great. Santa Rosa had a great basketball environment back then, and everybody played in the summer, and it was great. So
You know, the talent was exceptional for the pool of athletes. You all
yeah,
knew one another, which made the games really, really competitive. But
yeah.
the level of play, I'm telling you, Pat, I'm not a reactionary. The level of play then was a lot better than the level of play now.
Really, how so?
The level of
Yeah,
play then, um, kids were so much more dedicated to the game. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you'd go out on a Sunday at Proctor Terrace and play 5 or 6 hours. You can't get a kid now to take a ball and go outside. If they
Oh
can't get
man,
in the gym, they don't practice.
we used
But
to
it was,
live. Yeah,
oh,
we
you
we
live, eat, breathe, and sleep it. Now you still have kids like that, but they're few and
yeah,
in between.
uh,
And
yeah,
the other thing is, there was a commitment to try to play the game the right way. You guys would have fun playing when you played in your own, but
yeah,
you would compete.
yeah,
You'd
yeah,
compete.
yeah.
And that edge is not like that edge was, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And believe me, I've had a lot of really exceptional teams in the last even 5 years. But that that quality across the board, that competitive sharpness,
Yeah.
what you don't have it in this area so much anymore.
And you mentioned parents must be hard to deal with because if you think about it now, these parents are pretty young. They're probably, they're born after, I mean, they're not of your generation, and they probably don't understand that idea that you got to work and you got to be on time and you got to, you know, get better every day. There's a
We,
different
we have
environment, I think. Yeah.
there's a term we use. It's called helicopter parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Helicopter parents. And the problem that you see a lot is that parents get involved in areas they shouldn't be involved.
Yeah.
Okay. In basketball strategy and who's better and who's playing.
Yeah.
When I coached you guys, that wasn't an issue. I
Yeah.
mean, it was, but not to the degree that it became. And nowadays, parents think, every kid is a scholarship player. They don't
Yeah.
understand I
Yeah.
always ask parents, do you ever watch television?
Yeah.
Have you ever watched college Division 1 college players? And you think your son or you think this guy or that guy in this area can play at that level? I've had 6 Division 1 players in my coaching career.
Hmm.
You know the success we've had. But I mean, you have to be remarkable. A guy like Craig McMillan out of our area to play Division 1 basketball on a
Yeah.
scholarship.
Yeah.
And I think it's a combination of the parents over assessing the abilities of their child, wanting to protect their child, and getting into areas to stick up for their child rather than let the child fail and figure it out. They
Yeah.
want their child always to be happy. And you and I both know if you're a competitor and you're growing up in life, you're not always going to be happy. You figure it out, you work through it, you work hard, you overcome.
Yeah.
It's not handed to you. And there's
Yeah.
way too much of the flip side I'm talking about going on in sports. It's ruining the sport. So
Might be ruining the entire culture. This whole
I
idea
would
that,
agree.
yeah,
I
that you
agree.
get something for nothing. Well, I want to talk about your teaching a little bit, but can you see a
Okay.
difference? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we started Zoom teaching online, of course, with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I had taught 13 weeks, the last 13 weeks of last year online, and it was new to me. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
let's get real. I'm 67. Technology is not exactly my forte.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I learned quickly and I went to seminars. So teaching Zoom online. And now we started this year. And, San Jose JC just the other day said they're going to stay online all year.
Yeah, we're not getting back anytime soon. We can get away from that, but what I meant was, I remember your classes were always the hardest in the school. Everybody was dreading your government class because they know they actually had to work. What was your philosophy in teaching kids about politics and government, and why was your class so difficult for people? And I think you had the same philosophy you did in sports, right? You don't want to teach an easy class. Nobody remembers the easy teachers. There's no reason to, you know.
I think number one, I think it's details are important.
Hmm.
Number two, I think perspective's more important than details. You need details to accurately describe perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. So I always felt content was important, but I also felt writing style and the expression verbally, orally, and wrote, obviously, they're all very important
Hmm.
areas of expression. And I believed a lot in dialoguing, which is kind of the Socratic way of teaching.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the effectiveness I had in teaching, I've taught over 8,500 students now,
Wow. Yeah.
over
Yeah.
8,500 kids. And I've got great results from kids and great feedback from kids. I hear from kids all the time from long ago, you
Hmm.
being a prime example. And I think the main thing as a teacher, it's about your content and about what you're teaching, but it's how you teach. And you need to talk about things that aren't in the book. You
Yeah.
need to talk about value. You need to talk about life. You need to give real life examples. You wind all that together. When you talk about, quote, the greatest compliment you can get as a teacher is be an unforgettable teacher or an unforgettable coach in a
Yeah.
positive way. And I think that's where that unforgettable thing comes from.
Yeah.
It's your uniqueness and your personality and your presentation.
What made your class so challenging to students? Did you give them a term paper? What was
I
difficult
think
about your
I
classes?
think, and I see this nowadays. I
Yeah.
believe in frequent testing. In
Yeah.
fact, I tested almost every class. You had to
Mhm.
read, you had to take notes, and exams every about 3 or 4 classes,
Yeah.
constantly evaluating you, which is a lot of work for the teacher. That's why teachers don't do it.
Yeah.
And even online, I'm teaching online. I'm not to the end of the semester yet, but I've tested my kids 11 times
Yeah. So they
currently in this
so they
school
have
year.
to be prepared. You always told us to be prepared. We had to write 5 goals out before each game. Do you still do that?
Still do that. 5 personal goals, 5 team goals, still do it. Still
That's a
do it.
long time ago. We'd have to do that before the game. We'd have to give them to you. And you used to tell us something else about being a basketball player, because in the United States, this is an international audience we're talking to, but you're kind of a star of the campus if you're a good athlete. And you used to always tell us, don't listen to the fans, they don't want you to succeed. What did you mean by that? Because I always remember that, and I was kind of confused by that as a 17-year-old kid. But I know what you mean now. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
I think there's two things there
Yeah.
about, when you talk about this idea, I think number one, you don't want to listen to fans because they may distract you or want you to do something other than what the coach wants you to do.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, there's always a lot of jealousy,
Yeah.
you know, in anything where you are successful in something that's as outwardly available to people
Yeah.
as athletics, knowing how important athletics is in our culture.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a scholar, you're not in the front page. If you play basketball, you are.
Yeah.
We have a sports section everybody goes to, and a lot of times back in the day, even now, they skip the rest of the paper. They go right to the sports section.
Yeah.
So I think even in our own school, there were people that were not part of what we were doing that actually wanted to see us fail
Yeah.
because they were intimidated by the level of success. And
Yeah.
I think that's a human thing. Well, of course, jealousy and envy are capital sins, but I think that was what I meant by that. And the other thing, you don't want fans and parents, you don't want the things outside of the team. You don't want those things to distract the singular focus, the singular game plan. I used to always tell you guys, there's only one game plan, it's mine.
Yeah. And I remember that. And all of our team, Brian Long, Tom Sullivan, Bruce Belden, all of those guys, I remember, Troy Blank, all of those teammates, I still remember their personalities to this day because you challenged us in practice and we really had to be a group, but we were a team. Your biggest sin was you're not an individual. There's no individuals on this team. And I still remember that. And I think our style reflected that. And I think we owe you a lot for teaching us that.
Well, the team concept, John Wooden always says there's no I in team. That's another
Yeah.
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And I think, you want to teach kids to be humble, to be unselfish, to want to make their teammates look good. And you ultimately teach them the right values. So when you get to that pressure situation, if you look at the pyramid of success, something I still teach to my players, the John Wooden's pyramid of success,
Yeah.
at the very top, what do you have? Competitive greatness. And the
Mhm.
two things boarding competitive greatness are humility and patience. Patience means what? Good things take time.
Mhm.
They take work, they take practice, and they take failure sometimes. I mean, look at Thomas Edison. He failed 1,003 times before he invented the light bulb.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you've got to incorporate that failure is evolutionary. It's a product of great success. You don't look at it as something that's final.
There are no overnight successes out there. You would just see it, but there's a lot of work involved in being a success usually, in life. And I remember you really taught us that, and we valued that. And what about books? Do you have any influential books that changed your life over the years?
I have certain books that I really like. One of the books I really like is the book On the Brink about
Yeah,
Bobby Knight. And you
Feinstein.
talk about,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah, and you
reminded me of our team actually. That
a lot, a
yeah,
lot of our team
yeah,
when you play.
yeah,
And On the Brink is a great book, but Coach Fitzgerald and Bobby Knight were good friends. And
yeah.
what we teach still, what I teach is called the man-to-man defense. It's called the Indiana angle. It
Uh-huh.
comes from Bobby.
Yeah,
Okay. And I love that book. I've got all the John Wooden books.
yeah. They
I've
call
got
me
every
coach.
single,
Yeah,
yeah, I've got every one of those books. I still read those books. I'm really inspired by those books. Um, I like to read historical dramas. I still read a variety of those that I read.
hmm,
Um, I think probably the best motivational thing I have now, and it's really a good thing. Frank Alaco, the great coach at De La Salle High School. Now he's the AD at the University of San Francisco.
yeah,
Frank and I are really good friends. He won a couple titles at De La Salle. He won one at Northgate.
yeah,
And Frank and I are good friends. He does these podcasts that are 10 minutes,
hmm,
okay, on different subjects, and they're phenomenal. and I have, you know, a good friend of mine, Harold Aubin, who's a major guy that works with Mark Tennis and Cal High Sports. He sent all those to me. I frequently watch those, you know, and there he does a great job. You
Yeah,
get a hold of those. He does a great job.
I will check it out. So
I'll have to send you that link. Alocco's Allocco, Alocco, Frank Alocco, but some really great motivational things there. But yeah,
yeah.
and I still have other books that I read, but yeah,
Do you
those
watch
things.
do you watch much TV these days, or what do you do?
Yeah, my wife and I just bought a new 65-inch flat screen. Okay.
Yeah,
So we have Netflix,
yeah,
and I still like watching my sporting events, but she and I watch a lot of movies together.
yeah,
I still like the old movies. I
yeah,
love the old movies.
yeah.
You know, we watched It's a Wonderful Life last night.
Still
What a
good.
great movie. What a great movie. And yeah, I enjoy a good movie. I
I
do.
watched that in Vince Canziani's religion class when I was 16 years old, and I didn't really understand it in 16. But I think the older you get, the more you get out of that film. I think about
I I completely agree. There's a lot of depth in It's a Wonderful Life. And
yeah,
of course, my favorite movie of all time, as I told you guys when I taught you, it hasn't changed, is still The Wizard of Oz. And I
Wizard.
love that book.
Why is
The
that your
Wizard
favorite? Why is that your favorite? You know?
of F. Frank Baum. There's some things there that are just amazing. I've actually got books and I've studied it meticulously, like
Yeah,
the 4 times a horse changes color from the
yeah,
time they get to the Emerald City to the time they get to the Wizard. I
yeah,
love that movie. I watch it every year. It's usually on around Easter time, or they have a special now that every year that's done. They do it every year about Thanksgiving now.
yeah.
But what do I love about the book? I think it teaches some really important things. You know, a lot of times we have the things we need, we don't realize we have them.
Hmm.
I love the last words in the movie. There's no place like home.
Yeah,
Born and raised in Santa Rosa, I'm fourth generation. There is no place like home. And I think the other thing it teaches you things about loyalty, about friendship,
yeah.
and of course it has that fundamental theme of good and evil, but I think there's a lot to be learned in the characterization of the movie. I love every one of the characters.
A lot of metaphors in there, right? The Tin Man is the industrial worker, the Scarecrow is the farmer, and lots of political sort of allegory in that film, I think, in the
There's a
book.
lot of political allegory. Of course, when he wrote that film, we wrote the book. Frank Baum was 899. It was 1900, right around the turn of the century.
Yeah,
Of course, it hit the screen in 1939. Unfortunately, didn't get the credit it deserved because the great movie Gone with the Wind.
yeah, yeah,
And it didn't get it only won a couple of Academy Awards. But, I think it's a very, very good political satire. Another movie I watched the other night that's a great political satire, Citizen Kane,
yeah,
with Orson Welles.
yeah.
But I still watch the old classics. I like them. I
What I
enjoy 'em.
remember about The Wizard of Oz is, and I think the same thing about the early Disney films, Sleeping Beauty or the Snow White, is how beautiful they were, and how much it still is amazing when the Wizard of Oz turns to color. It's just still amazing, all these years later. Yeah,
Right. The first two color ride films were that and Gone with the Wind, the battle scene at Gone
yeah,
with the Wind when it goes
yeah,
color.
yeah. So
Which is when Technicolor was really invented. But I grew up watching a Silvertone black and white TV.
yeah,
So color really had a major impact on me because everything had been in black and white throughout my childhood.
yeah.
And now people kind of take it for granted. But the color on a 65-inch screen is pretty amazing, Pat. I got to tell you that.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear it, Coach. And so Cardinal Newman survived a lot. There was a fire there a couple of years ago. How are you guys hanging in there? I know you're not at Newman anymore. We'll talk about that at another time. But everything okay in Santa Rosa? Yeah,
Yeah, I think most of Cardinal Newman's kind of rebuilt. They're still in bungalows, okay,
yeah,
temporaries. And
yeah,
they have plans and they've raised a lot of money. They eventually will build a new school out there. It's going to be beautiful.
yeah,
I think the amazing thing of this area is the resilience of the people, like in many parts of the world.
yeah,
Um, we lost another, I don't know, probably 700 or 800 structures this year.
yeah,
And I had to evacuate out of Oakmont. We had actually, Oakmont's huge now. You wouldn't believe how big it is. Oakmont,
yeah.
believe it or not, 5,200 people live in Oakmont.
Jeez.
Okay. So we lost 4 structures. The fire actually got to, not far from where I live. And we had a week evacuation. So these wildfires are a major problem. We got a little bit of rain today, but
Yeah.
we've got less than 2 inches of rain, and we look where we're at.
To those who don't don't know, Santa Rosa actually almost burned to the ground. It's really unusual, a modern city having a wildfire like that. It looked like something out of World War II when I looked at the news footage of that. It was amazing. So okay, but well, Coach, I know my father played basketball at Seattle University and used to tell me that they beat the Globetrotters, and I never believed him. And now on the internet, I can look it up and see that that was actually true. And I want to thank you for helping me out with that situation that I had there. Good to see you, Coach.
You know what? Your dad was a good man. And you know the thing about it, Pat, I love you and I love all my players and all my students. And I'll tell you what, seeing you and talking to you today means so much to me. And anytime I get a phone call, I get a text message, and I get a lot of them.
Yeah.
That's why I continue at the age of 67 to do what I do. And it's a gift. God gave me a gift. And, I love the kids I teach and I love the kids I coach. And I understand the importance of what I'm doing, and it's God's work. And I really enjoy doing it. And I'll continue to do it as long as God allows.
Well, Coach, I'm going to wrap it up here. We owe you a lot, and thanks for joining me. I hope it's not the last time, and take care of yourself.
Thank you very much, Pat. Anytime. Thank you. Anytime.